A fishery so productive it fed a nation, then vanished overnight, taking thousands of jobs and an entire regional economy with it. Between 1920 and 1930, California's sardine fishery wasn't just successful, it was a miracle. The waters off Monterey Bay were so thick with sardines that fishermen could haul in record catches year after year. Canneries lined the coast, processing thousands of tons weekly. The industry created wealth so visible, new buildings, new boats, new fortunes, that it felt infinite. But by 1935, the sardine population had collapsed so completely that the fishery would take decades to recover. This wasn't a market crash, this was nature hitting a hard stop. Exhibit 1, the scale was staggering. In 1929 alone, California's sardine fleet caught roughly 200,000 tons of fish. That's not a typo, 200,000 tons. For context, that single year's catch would have supplied fresh fish to millions of Americans for months. Canneries couldn't process sardines fast enough. Some fish rotted on docks because there simply wasn't enough industrial capacity to handle the bounty. Exhibit 2, the economic dependency was absolute. Monterey's entire regional economy rested on sardines. Fishermen, cannery workers, truck drivers, dock handlers, shop owners, they all depended on the harvest. Wages were good, housing boomed, restaurants thrived, schools expanded. When sardines were plentiful, money flowed through the community like water. Nobody questioned whether it would last. Why would they? The fish had always been there. Exhibit 3, the warning signs were ignored. Marine biologists and a few experienced fishermen noticed something troubling in the late 1920s. Catches weren't shrinking yet, they were still enormous, but the fish were getting smaller. The ratio of juvenile to adult sardines was shifting. These patterns suggested overfishing. But when you're hauling in record profits, warnings sound like pessimism. Boat owners expanded their fleets. Canneries invested in new equipment. Monterey doubled down. Then came 1932. The catch dropped, not catastrophically at first, just noticeably down from the peak, but it kept falling. By 1934, sardine landings had crashed by nearly 90% from the 1929 peak. Fishermen went out with the same boats, same nets, same effort. The ocean was simply empty. The sardine population had collapsed under the weight of industrial-scale extraction. What happened to the fish themselves? Scientists later determined that sardines are cyclical. They have natural boom and bust periods tied to ocean temperature, food availability, and breeding patterns. The population had likely been in a natural decline phase anyway, but human overfishing accelerated it catastrophically. We caught so many fish so quickly that the population couldn't replenish itself. The human cost was brutal. Canneries shut down by the dozens. Thousands of workers lost jobs in a community with no alternative industries. Boats sat idle in the harbor. The housing boom reversed, restaurants closed, schools had to cut budgets. A region that had felt wealthy and stable overnight became economically devastated. And this was 1932, right in the middle of the Great Depression. Monterey wasn't just hit by a local crisis. It was hit by two catastrophes at once. Here's what makes this story economically instructive. Monterey's collapse wasn't caused by fraud, speculation, or irrational exuberance in the traditional sense. There were no fake balance sheets. No one was lying about sardine populations. The market was responding to real supply. The problem was that supply was finite, and nobody, not fishermen, not business owners, not economists, factored in biological reality. We treated an ocean like an infinite vending machine. The sardine industry didn't recover for nearly 60 years. It took until the 1980s for sardine populations off California to rebound enough for commercial fishing to resume. Think about that timeline. Fishermen who lost their jobs in 1932 never worked in that industry again. Their children grew up in a depressed region. The wealth that had seemed so solid evaporated completely. But Monterey's story is also about something deeper, the psychology of boom cycles. When something is working, when money is flowing and jobs are plentiful, it's almost impossible to imagine it stopping. Humans are wired to extrapolate. We see a trend and assume it continues. We don't naturally think in terms of limits or cycles, we think in terms of growth. The sardine collapse happened because of a specific economic blind spot. We can see the price tag on a can of sardines. We can count the boats. We can measure the tonnage. What we can't easily see is the biological carrying capacity of an ecosystem. That's invisible. So we optimized for what we could measure: profit, catch volume, revenue, and ignored what we couldn't until we hit a wall. This pattern repeats across history. The Atlantic cod fishery collapsed in the 1990s. Whale populations were hunted to near extinction. Forests were clear-cut until they couldn't regenerate. We have a template: find something abundant, extract it at maximum efficiency, assume abundance is permanent, then watch as it vanishes. The Monterey sardines just happened first, and they happened spectacularly. So here's why the sardine collapse matters as a financial story. It shows us that economic crises don't always come from human psychology alone. Sometimes they come from the hard limits of reality. You can have rational actors, honest accounting, real demand, and genuine profit, and still crash into a wall because you misread the carrying capacity of your resource base. The fishermen of Monterey weren't stupid or reckless. They were responding to market signals that seemed perfectly rational. High demand, abundant supply, good prices, that's the green light to expand. But they were operating on incomplete information about the system they were extracting from. And once you've depleted a biological resource, you can't simply restock it by printing more money or adjusting interest rates. The sardine collapse also reveals something about regional economies built on a single commodity. When your entire town depends on one resource, you're not diversified, you're not resilient, you're vulnerable. Modern economists call this the resource curse, the paradox that places with abundant natural resources often end up economically fragile because they neglect other industries. What happened next is important too. After the collapse, Monterey had to rebuild. The region diversified: tourism, agriculture, military installations, later tech. It survived, but it took decades. And the people who lived through the 1930s collapse never fully recovered their losses. That's the human cost baked into economic cycles. The Great Sardine Collapse of the 1930s was a real economic crisis, not a bubble of speculative excess, but a collision between industrial extraction and biological reality. It teaches us that markets don't just fail from psychology or fraud, they fail when we optimize for what we can measure while ignoring what we can't. Monterey's fishermen could see the price of sardines. They couldn't see the finite limits of the ocean. And that invisible gap cost them everything. So that's why sardine prices spiked in the 1920s and why they disappeared from California markets by the mid-1930s. Not because of market manipulation, not because of greed in any individual sense, but because an entire region treated an ocean like an infinite resource and the ocean had different rules. Understanding that difference between what we can measure and what actually matters is the real lesson here. This video is for educational and informational purposes only and is not financial advice. Always do your own research. Subscribe to see the next financial collapse hiding in plain sight, where the market's blind spots meet reality's hard limits. This video is for educational and informational purposes only and is not financial advice. Always do your own research.